back to the morning roast with Bonta and Shasky.
I got a funny text from Worldwide Hef I'll read after Bobby Marks. I don't want Bobby Marks to hang up the phone. It's a pretty funny text. I think you'll like it, Shasky. I think Spadoni will like it. Loveman, I have no idea. Craig Mack would definitely like the text. Text was pretty good. I mean, implement it into this program. We'll see. Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider. He joins us now in the morning roast. And we love Bobby Marks because he said Stephen Curry is the second greatest player of all time. And here in the Bay Area, we love hearing stuff like that, especially with Steph coming off his finals MVP. Warriors winning the NBA championship, their fourth in the last 8 years, seventh overall in franchise history. And basketball is ramping back up. And Bobby, we need to figure out some numbers, man. Good morning.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Oh, man, we're doing well. Ring night's coming up October 18th. And the Warriors have an embarrassment of riches. You already know. You look at the roster. Who's going to get minutes? Who's not going to get minutes? You got the young studs and Kuminga, Moody, Wiseman, Jordan Poole, Wiggins. You got the core with Steph, Clay, and Dre. So let's go. Let's start with this. Tyler Hero signs a 4-year, $130 million deal. Is that the floor for Jordan Poole on his upcoming contract extension? What do you think happens with Jordan Poole in the next couple weeks?
Well, I think when that number came out, and it's 120, there's another $10 million in unlikely bonuses that he won't hit. So it's a $27 million starting number. Goes up to $33 million. So I think if you're the Golden State front office when that number came out, I think you probably cringed a little bit here, because now if you're Jordan Poole, you're looking at maybe not 120, but maybe 112. I mean, remember, Anthony Simons got 4 years, $100 million.
Yeah. This
past offseason, and and the cap's going up to 134. I think at the minimum number for Poole is probably 4 years, $112 million. I think that's I think anything less than that, and you're certainly going into restricted free agency next year. I think Hero's a little bit more different. I think Tyler is probably a little more established than Jordan over the 3 years. Certainly what Jordan did last year, probably, I guess, is from an overall big picture, is probably a little bit better than certainly Tyler, who struggled here and there. But yeah, I mean, it's going to cost you. I mean, Joe Lacob has been on the record saying that, they're not spending $400 million in luxury tax and salary in next off season. And I have a piece coming out next week, and it says you don't got to be a math major to figure out, you can't bring back the same roster and not spend that amount. So somebody is going to have to go. Somebody is not going to be back from this group when we talk about next year.
Yeah, and so if you were kind of ranking them, I guess, in terms of what you deem to be the most important for the immediate future, of the guys, Jordan Poole's one of them. You got Wiggins coming up, and then Draymond, and then eventually down the line, obviously, Klay Thompson. How would you rank them in terms of importance of getting locked up to a long-term deal?
Well, I think Klay is probably 4, just because he's got 2 years left.
Yeah.
Last year was really the only, his first year healthy on that 5-year contract. So, we basically have punted, 2 years worth there. So I think Klay is probably, on the back end. I wouldn't, I don't think you're going to be entertaining extension talks before the 17th. I'd be surprised. I think Poole is, I would probably put 3, just based on you basically control. He's not an unrestricted free agent. He's a restricted free agent next offseason. You've got the match on an offer sheet. However, the cost of him might be higher than it is next offseason compared to maybe what it is going to be in the next 2 weeks here. Wiggins is an unrestricted free agent, right? I mean, you've got to figure out, are you comfortable paying him $30 million, $32 million? And then the Draymond question is going to be interesting here. He's got a $27.5 million player option here. Does he look like he has, from his perspective, does it look like he has sacrificed in his prior 2 contracts? I think you could probably look at it that way. If he does not get an extension by the 17th, he's still eligible up until June 30th, but the first year of the extension's got to be the same as the player option. So at a minimum, he's getting a $28 million starting salary in year 1 here. So we all know the value of Draymond as far as what he brings to this team. Are you giving him an extension based on what he's done in the past, or what the future is going to hold for him. I think that's kind of where teams run into a problem here. So yeah, I mean it's almost like it's a tie, but I think Poole is a priority, but not as probably much as far as figuring out what Wiggins is going to do. And I think certainly, I think with Draymond, hey, the Lakers are sitting on $35 million in cap space next year. If he becomes a free agent, is he a priority for them? Are they willing to commit long term when LeBron and AD are basically on 1-year deals?
Interesting. Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider here on the Roast on 95.7 The Game with Joe Shasky, the Butcher, and Vontae Hill. So you have Wiggins there. That's intriguing because I feel like his market's going to be trending up coming off of that postseason performance. Game 5, of course, against the Celtics in the finals, 26-13. He was probably the Warriors' second. When you talk about consistency, he was right behind Stephen Curry there in that postseason. Is that a guy the Warriors can't afford to leave, or do you look at the bench and say, well, they have Moody, they have Kuminga coming, you still have Jordan Poole at his rights? Is that a guy you think the Warriors would be comfortable letting walk? Because he looks real comfortable in the system, Bobby.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice insurance policy that you have, and you're going to need big years out of Kuminga and Moody and certainly Jordan Poole when you have those young lottery players picked in the lottery as kind of that next man up. So in case maybe the price tag for Andrew Wiggins is too high next off season, you do have an insurance policy here. I think the Wiggins price tag is going to be interesting because we saw what happened in Minnesota when he was basically the number 1 or number 2 guy, and I don't know if he's the right person for every team out there. I don't think he's a franchise player. So, as you know, franchise players make north of $35 million. So do teams kind of get scared off based on what they saw in Minnesota as far as his first 5 years? I think he's found a great comfort level as far as being that third guy in Golden State, and I think I would be a little bit nervous if I'm looking at him being at that number 1 or that number 2 guy from a team other than Golden State.
Bobby, as someone who was a team builder in a front office, and as someone who's now evaluating the entire league and seeing all the situations, from a team building aspect, is this like GM ecstasy? You've got an owner who's willing to, for the most part, spend whatever it takes. You obviously have all of these young players that you're hoping can develop. You still have one of the top, 2 or 3 best players in the NBA at minimum in Steph Curry. You got a bunch of veterans. Like, when you look and how team building comes about, is this about as awesome as you can see around the league, in the history of the league? Because I can't think of anything that comes close to this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could probably point to, back in the day, San Antonio, right, as far as how and the longevity of it, where you draft, Tim Duncan and then Manu and Tony Parker, and then you had that great run, until, now they're retooling here. But I think what's interesting in Golden State is they kind of check the boxes, right? We know how great they've drafted. They hit on the trade. They went through that lull, that 2-year gap period where ownership was still willing to spend, similar to what we're seeing down in LA with the Clippers here. Kawhi and Paul George get hurt, but they're willing to go out and extend Robert Covington and Ifeatu Zubac and go out and get Norman Powell and Covington, when the team was heading towards the play-in here. So, I mean, if you have an owner that's, willing to commit resources when the roster is not up to par, but knowing down the road Clay is going to get healthy, Steph's going to get healthy, Draymond's going to get healthy, you've got these lottery picks here, then that's what every front office wants here. And they've done it right. I mean, they certainly have be able to win a championship after 2 years of lottery, and then being in the play-in is something that we don't see very often. It's incredibly hard to do.
So Joe Lacob got fined $500,000 talking about the luxury tax and the penalties, and we look at the Warriors cap situation. Do you think the NBA will do something about that? Because a lot of Warrior fans, Shasky knows this, it feels unfair that they're getting penalized for developing their own talent. Now, I know they brought in Andrew Wiggins from Minnesota, but that was basically they had that lane, that salary cap situation right there with Andrew Wiggins. What do you think the NBA will do about this moving forward, about the luxury tax?
Well, for me personally, I mean, I would love to see a way where teams that do draft are not penalized as much, if you're drafting, Steph or Draymond or Kuminga, any of those. Maybe you're getting, instead of you're getting 50% tax on those type players here. I think certainly the Wiggins situation is different here, or maybe the player going into that rookie extension like Jordan Poole, you're not getting, if he's making $25 million, maybe you're only getting taxed on $12 million of that. I mean, I'd love to see that because I think it does reward teams for drafting well. Well, but on the other end, you're going to have, these probably some of these mid or small markets saying, well, wait a minute, when's enough's enough? When is, we can have Golden State and the Clippers spending $400 million in salary and luxury tax next year, but you're getting that money to you, right? The distribution is going to be at an all-time high. So I think there's a handful of owners that probably want to see a harsher penalty from the luxury tax. I think there's a handful that are saying, well, wait a minute, let's maybe we tweak the system here where we're getting a little bit relief as far as from a luxury tax standpoint based on how well we draft.
Yeah, we've got NBA insider Bobby Marks with us. Used to work in the front office for NBA teams, and he just knows how the inner workings of the front office goes. One last question here for you, Bobby. Just hypothetically, I don't want anyone traded, but if you're looking at the young guys the Warriors do have, the Kuminga, Wiseman, Moody, Jordan Poole, who's got the most outside value out of curiosity? Who's the player that the rest of the league would want the most of those young guys?
I would say probably Kuminga. Just because he's going into year 2, he's on this inexpensive rookie contract. He's a big wing. He's certainly behind from an offensive standpoint where Jordan is, and probably even where Moody is. But I think the total upside of him is probably higher than the other 3 or 4 players. I think certainly with Wiseman, the injuries, and we'll see. Hey, this is a big year for him. It's going into year 3 here. If he has a big year, he'll be part of the future here. But I think for me, when I look at the younger players, it's probably Kuminga.
Yeah, that's a good call, Bobby Marks. We appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Can't wait for basketball. Should be exciting, especially here in the Bay Area.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Anytime, Bobby Marks, NBA front office insider there. Kuminga.